Sequels and nostalgia have been dominating Hollywood for what seems like an eternity. Between superheroes, spin-offs, and any sort of reboot companies can get their hands on, originality seems all but a too distant memory. So, of course, when I heard the rumblings and eventual official announcement of Matrix 4 Resurrections, I was very, very skeptical. I was, and still am, a fan of the original Matrix trilogy. Despite some of the shortcomings these movies may have, they still satisfy me as a fan with interesting morals, unique storytelling, and some great action sequences, some that are even iconic to this very day. But as many fans of any franchise, long-term or otherwise, will tell you, that tapping the well one too many times could be the downfall of something you love. I'm sure you've either seen or heard of sequels or continuations or reboots of some of your favorite movies or shows absolutely bombing because they failed to capture the spirit of what they were originally continuing. Some on purpose, some accidental. Like I said, not every movie or franchise is necessarily perfect, but a random sequel to a movie trilogy that, while not perfect, to me still had a solid ending that didn't really leave much room for continuation, kinda worried me. But how does it hold up? Does Matrix Resurrection hold up to its forefathers, or are we wishing that history truly did indeed stay history? I'm OK Fabe, and this is my review of Matrix 4 Resurrections. Now, obviously, before I get into this will be a very spoiler-heavy review. I originally tried to write this whole thing with the idea of it being relatively vague, but if you've seen any of the Matrix movies, you know that they are anything but vague. In order for me to go into more details about what I liked and what I didn't like, I will have to go into a bit more detail about the plot itself, characters, and of course the themes of the movie as well as the originals. Oh, and this should also go into the goes without saying category that this movie is indeed a sequel to the original trilogy. If you have not seen any of the 3 previous Matrix movies, The Matrix Reloaded, and The Matrix Revolutions, then chances are you're probably not going to understand a majority of this. I only bring this up because it was heavily rumored at the time, right before this movie's release, and even upon seeing the trailer, that this may be a reboot where the last 2 movies didn't even matter, or you could maybe understand it without having to really watch the previous movies. Well, let me just get this out of the way right here, right now. I am here to tell you right up front, this is not the case. The movie is indeed a continuation from the original 3. And with that out of the way, let's dive in, or take a red pill, or blue pill, whatever. You know what, that actually sounded weird. Let's just get into it. The movie begins with a woman observing what we believe to be the beginning of the original Matrix movie, with Trinity almost scene for scene. The only difference is that this is in fact not Trinity, but rather a different woman altogether, but the results are the same, despite some different looking agents and other people in their roles. She is caught on the roof, however, mid-run, as opposed to being caught all the way at the phone booth like we saw at the beginning of the movie, and it seems this woman named Bugs is observing everything, saying she knows how this story goes, but sadly herself gets spotted by the agents as well. As she eventually breaks away and begins a chase around the area, she stumbles into a room with a black agent. I apologize for categorizing this character like this, but I'll explain why in just a moment. When they room jump through a door, much like in Matrix Reloaded with the Keymaker, they find their way into the apartment of one Mr. Anderson. Bugs and the agent begin a conversation when they feel as if they know each other, as the agent can't really explain why he didn't kill her given his protocol. After piecing some information together, Bugs offers the agent a red pill, offering him the truth as she is starting to guess what her purpose was. After awakening him, he is revealed to be none other than Morpheus, or at least a version of him. Don't worry, we'll get into that later down the road. While he is coming to, the other agents catch on and target the two as they barely escape a building, and then of course jumping off and then seemingly rather disappear. We then cut to none other than one Mr. Thomas Anderson himself, who is a video game developer working on his new game when he notices some pretty odd glitches. He somewhat shakes it off as he is called into his boss's office. Over the course of, I'd say, the next third of the movie, we get an idea of what is going on with Mr. Anderson. He is one of the most successful video game developers of all time, creating The Matrix as a series of video games. Essentially, at this point in the movie, everything you know from the original trilogy in this world is a video game, right down to every detail. The one thing that I will say that throughout this movie, especially either in pivotal or connecting moments, is that they do a series of flashbacks. Now, I can see where this can be annoying, especially at the beginning, but to me it helped emphasize certain either callbacks or important parts that help you better understand what the movie was trying to tell. Again, a little bit of an annoying thing at the beginning, and not every flashback meant everything, but I did appreciate it further into the movie as we went along. In any case, Mr. Anderson is trying to make the best life he possibly can, successful at work, seeing a therapist, and enjoying the success of his labors. He is clearly alone, but his therapist, played by Neil Patrick Harris, tries to ground Mr. Anderson back into reality. We see at least 1 or 2 sessions where he is having dreams or flashbacks of his own, and it's clear that he's having trouble separating the game from reality. I say this with air quotes. You'll obviously know why when we get a little further into this. The doctor even explains that Mr. Anderson has incorporated things in his everyday life from his game, like including the hatred of his own cat. The problem is that when he cannot disassociate one from the other. We even see him taking medication that are in fact blue pills, which, for those of you who forgot, are representing people wanting to stay in the Matrix and enjoy the fantasy life inside and not being freed. We also see Mr. Anderson's boss, who revealed that while they may not have seen eye to eye at the beginning, they understand each other and understand how everything works. The boss informs him that Warner Brothers wants Anderson and his team to make a 4th Matrix movie. Or rather, video game. What I have to say here is I love how meta this can be, especially in this conversation with the boss. They even have something to the effect of, I know you said you were done and the game was written to be the ending, but the studios at Warner Brothers said that they would do this with or without us. This even reflects somewhat of what really happened behind the scenes, as originally they were going to do this movie without any influence from the Wachowskis whatsoever, but luckily we did get Lana as a director, which I'll take one Wachowski over none. Thank you very much. We continue to see the teamwork into its way writing in the new game, even referencing what is truly needed in this sequel, bullet time. And again, those who don't know, that was the method they used to create the iconic scene of Neo dodging the bullets from the first movie, essentially slowing down time on an action sequence. We then cut to Mr. Anderson trying to meet with a woman named Tiffany, who looks a lot like Trinity. They do the whole have we met thing, but it doesn't take long for the conversation to end, with Tiffany going along with her husband and kids. As Anderson continues working on the game, he keeps having trouble separating the game and real life again, so we see a scene where he has stopped taking his blue pill medication. An incident then happens at his work where everyone is evacuated except Anderson gets a bizarre text message telling him to go into a different room down the hall. Of course, it's revealed to be Morpheus, or at least the one we saw from the beginning of the movie that was formerly an agent. Anderson blocks this out and trying to say it's not real, but of course after Morpheus puts his hand through a liquid mirror, it's confirmed that this isn't real and this is indeed the case. An intense shootout happens with either Anderson's boss picking up a gun as he tries to cope with what's going on. Anderson's boss even mimics old habits of Smith, revealing him to be, of course, none other than the old Agent Smith. Now, he doesn't physically change into that form, but the mannerisms and the tone he speaks with lines up with the old Agent Smith, played by Hugo Weaving. Anderson seems to snap out of this, even recalling it with his own therapist, again by Neil Patrick Harris, and he starts to question things more and more. He recalls how even at an award ceremony he attempted to commit suicide by jumping off a building, but we obviously didn't see it work out, and we didn't see any sort of resolution from it, just him trying to step off of the building, but no rescue, no anything from it whatsoever. He later goes up on a roof having some liquid refreshments as he tries to go and fly once again, convinced that he can fly, but Bugs once again appears and pulls him off of the roof. She quickly explains that what Anderson created in the game that he was working on was a module, the thing that he saw bug out earlier. It's essentially a programming sandbox where characters can be developed and leveled up. She explains that Anderson must have created it so that she, Bugs, could sneak in and awake Morpheus, or rather a combination program. It's later explained that the Morpheus that we see is in fact a combination program of parts of both Morpheus and Agent Smith. She said he created him because it was a combination of the two most pivotal people in his life that made him who he is, Neo. She takes him to a train which they use to travel, then hops through a door into a theater room where they explain a little bit more about how it's been almost 60 years since the events at the end of the last movie. They are all trying to figure out how and why Neo is alive, and while it seems everything is the same, but his deal at the end of the last movie did make a difference, or at least that's what Bugs says. After being discovered by the machines, they attack to try to prevent Neo from waking back up, but they fail after this massive fight shootout sequence both in the theater and also on the train. A few things to point out in this as I seemingly gloss over the fight, but it should be noted is, first, they aren't really agents anymore. There really aren't agents around anymore. Sure, machines can still infect someone like they did in before and take them over as long as they're hooked up to the Matrix, but they don't just transform into the agents physically anymore. I have to say, I kind of have mixed feelings about this one. On one hand, the fights with the agents were iconic with the series, but I also enjoyed that now anyone can seemingly be a threat even in plain sight. Second, the method of transporting in and out of the Matrix isn't the same anymore. Instead of using phones, it's now done through mirrors. With the advancement of technology, this certainly does make a whole lot of sense. It's not easy, obviously, as the operator still has to kind of find an open window or open mirror for them to be able to use, so they just can't use any mirror. They have to find out one that's available at the time. And lastly, Neo, at this point in the movie, has not thrown a single punch yet. He, I think, blocked a few or ran a little bit at this point, but nothing physical, or at least not yet. Neo has eventually found his way out. They're able to get him through the mirror, and he's unplugged, almost note for note in the same thing as the first movie in the pod and everything. However, it is obviously a little bit different. There's only one other pod near here, which appears to be none other than Trinity's. Two different machines grab Neo as they motion over Trinity, helping him escape to a nearby ship where they, of course, depart. He's introduced to the crew, which, I'll be honest, the names really don't matter a whole heck of a lot, but they explain how there is now some machines that are aiding with the humans. They rest and prepare as they head to EO, which essentially is Zion's 2.0, to meet with none other than the High Council member Niobe from the original trilogy. On the way, they try to awake Neo's powers by doing another remake of the fight simulation with Morpheus, and as you probably guessed from the trailer, it is successful. Once at EO, Niobe fills in a bit more about what's happened since Neo's departure. While Morpheus did take over as the leader of Zion, they realized that they needed machines in order to continue to thrive and even prosper. There's even an interesting scene that shows that they are now able to grow fruit as opposed to relying on that mushy slop that they used to eat in previous films. She goes on to explain that when Neo sacrificed himself, that there was essentially a purge of the old Matrix, and things somewhat rebooted. In any case, the goal is clear. Neo wants to free Trinity. Why? Well, outside of the obvious romantic reasons, it's never really explained why Neo wants to free Trinity, which I guess is reason enough, but that's besides the point. Niobe makes it clear that she doesn't want to risk the peace and stability that they have had for so long at Io, even mentioning how in the past she saw machines battle machines for a chance for humans to exist in the real world. She even upset with Bugs trying to rescue Neo in the first place, with Bugs making it a point that Niobe has given up on freeing minds and wants to grow strawberries instead. Despite that, of course, they go and try to rescue Trinity. Bugs and the team make it clear, though, that the last way they rescued Neo just won't work this time around, so they have to come up with a different plan. Neo wants to at least try to talk to her before anything else, but upon re-entering the Matrix as they are approached by Smith, or rather Neo's old boss, he confirms that this is in fact a new version of Agent Smith from the original trilogy. He basically explains that he is still free, for lack of a better phrase, and while he is back, he hates the limitation being put on him by the new program that controls the Matrix, and he understands that in order for him to kind of be free of those limitations, he definitely has to take out Neo. On top of that, old programs called Exiles showed up, programs that survived that purge we mentioned earlier, looking for revenge. One of them is actually a nice little cameo back as the Frenchman from Reloaded in the Revolutions movies. Up next is another chaotic brawl as the Exiles fight the crew while Smith and Neo battle. The fights are fun, but one thing is pretty clear: Neo is not in the same shape as he was before. He's able to slowly start to hold his own, but he is nowhere in control as he was from the last time we saw him fight, even with the training simulation we saw on board the ship. After the fight happens and everyone flees, Neo's able to find Tiffany working at her motorcycle shop. I forgot to mention there was a previous scene that they both had coffee at their favorite coffee shop, where there's hints that Tiffany may be remembering her old self, saying she played the game Anderson created, swearing they might be memories, but nothing really comes of it, obviously. When Neo meets with her, suddenly before any more can be further explained or revealed, everything instantly slows down. The good doctor/therapist, played by Neil Patrick Harris, is revealed to be none other than the program in charge. He explains that he is the analyst, and, well, it was ironic that he could stop him with none other than bullet time. He's the new creator of this version of the Matrix and explains that he was present the day Neo sacrificed himself in Revolutions. He continues on that he didn't want to just give Neo up and throw him away, knowing how valuable his role is as the One with his source code to the Matrix. He claims that he discovered what truly gave him his power, though, was when he was close to Trinity, showing flashbacks of the machines rebuilding both of them from the dead. However, when they held hands, a bright light enveloped the area. Bottom line, he needs to keep Trinity and Neo together in the Matrix, as it's the best way to power this version of the Matrix, as apparently them together, or rather, relatively close, doesn't have any of the previous issues from the previous versions of the Matrix where people are being woken and staying in the Matrix. He says Neo's awakening has destabilized everything, but he's confident he'll willingly go back to his pod in order to avoid putting Trinity's life in danger. He lets him go as the crew discovers that their ship was also discovered by Niobe's team back on Io, so now, of course, they have a choice. They can either stay and fight the oncoming squids, or follow them back to Io for court-martial, and they obviously choose the latter. Upon arriving at Io, after a short amount of arguing, a machine joins them, revealing to none other be Sati. Sati, Niobe, and Neo all join back in the Matrix, and Sati reveals herself as the little girl from Matrix Revolutions. She further reveals the machines killed her parents and is going to seek revenge by helping them free Trinity. Back in the real world, we see the crew sneak their way back into Trinity's pod area and have her on standby to essentially disconnect her from her pod, but use Bugs as essentially a starter of sorts, keeping her plugged in and able to free her proper while on the go. So the idea is that they want to obviously sever her connection from the Matrix from her pod so that she can still stay plugged in, but physically remove her from the pod area and awaken her as they're, outside of the machine area. It's actually a pretty clever idea, all things considered. Neo meets with the analyst and offers to go back to the Matrix, but only if Trinity doesn't go willingly. If she goes willingly, he's asking for them to both be free. So of course, at first, she doesn't and goes with her family and seems like they're just going to leave, but then as they're about to hurt Neo, she basically has a trigger moment and remembers. Huge fight with the crew, cops, and everyone, and as the analyst sees Trinity and Bugs merging in sorts and orders her to be killed, only to be stopped by none other than Smith. Smith helps them break from the huge fight, but realize they still need to get Trinity out of Dodge. Huge, and I do mean huge, chase sequence where people are chasing Neo, Trinity, and the crew, even using some people controlled as bomb divers jumping out of buildings. Gotta say, pretty badass moment. I think that was one of my favorites as far as the clever idea of we're gonna just control people and throw them out of the buildings. Neo and Trinity find their way ultimately to a rooftop where they take a leap of faith, and while Neo falls, Trinity actually begins to fly. She takes Neo away long enough for her and him to wake up on the ship perfectly fine. The movie ends with the two of them meeting the analyst again in the same therapy room as we saw at the beginning of the movie, with Trinity kicking his ass for a hot second, seeming to have the same powers as Neo now. They thank him for everything, sarcastically looking to now rearrange the Matrix as they see fit. So, with everything said and done, how does Matrix Resurrections hold up? Well, to me, it depends on how you look at it, but I will say my biggest overall problem with the film is that it feels, for lack of a better word, hollow. While there were plenty of fan service and some aspects of them I enjoy, it just felt like a continuation of the narrative. For example, in the last few movies, there was at least a somewhat underlying theme for better or worse. One of them had a choice, the other, purpose. I'm not saying that the execution of these ideas or concepts were always the best, but I appreciated the movie trying to have a deeper message beyond just the story that's being told or how that theme was incorporated in the movie. In Reloaded, it was about choice, whether, Neo was going to choose saving Trinity versus saving Zion. In Revolutions, it was about having the idea of purpose, is that we all have a purpose and we need to fill it out, and if nobody has a purpose, then that's the end of everything. This movie doesn't really have that, or at the very least, I didn't catch that. The overall idea was, hey, we need to rescue Trinity to free her for some sort of reason. I feel like, sadly, this is another attempt at Hollywood cashing in on a nostalgic franchise. Now, I will say that despite the movie feeling hollow in and of itself, there were several aspects of it I really did enjoy. I loved Neil Patrick Harris as the analyst. As we well know, he can pull off a charming personality/villain rather well, so this was refreshing to also have a program from the Matrix have some charm to it. I also think it was clever how the movie disguised other characters coming back in different forms as different actors like Smith and Morpheus. They obviously didn't have the same impact, but at the end of the day, the story really wasn't about them, so I didn't mind it as much. I will also say that the idea of Trinity having powers of the One, I'm kind of also on the fence about as well. On one hand, it's a unique aspect of the Matrix movies that really weren't told and creates some interesting opportunities for certain interactions and plot developments. On the other hand, it seems like a really lazy way to create some things to move the movies along. For instance, let's say Trinity didn't have the powers and wasn't really key to the machines in the Matrix of this one. Okay, so why now? Why wasn't this a problem before, especially during the duration of the 3 movies where they were together before? It was only when they died that this became a thing? It's this and other few plot points that make me scratch my head, but didn't really deter my overall enjoyment of the film either. I think there was really sincere effort in making something here, but I can't ignore just how empty it felt compared to its predecessors, which I know in some instances is also unfair. So I'm going to give Matrix Resurrections a 6 out of 10. If you loved Matrix movies before, great, but don't hold your expectations up too high, otherwise you'll be reaching for that blue pill. Let me know what you think in the comments below about what you thought of Matrix Resurrections. Subscribe, like, and share for more, and we'll see you guys next time.